What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, guys, we have a major pay-per-view coming up this Saturday night. UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi. Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria at the top of the bill. Khamzat Chimaev, Robert Whittaker on the card. We got the Shara Bullet on there. This thing is stacked from top to bottom. Today, Nick and I are going to break down each fight, starting with the main event on the main card, and give you our thoughts and predictions on the fight. So without further ado, Nick, let's get right into the main event.
Let's do it.
Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on this, because I have gone back and forth thinking about making this video and who I'm going to predict to win and how. So before I give my prediction, I'll kind of just give my thoughts on the fight, and then you can tell me what you're thinking as well.
Let's hear it.
Max Holloway, when you think of skilled veteran, Max Holloway has to be one of the first names that comes to mind.
For sure.
He's probably, arguably, the most durable fighter in the UFC. Now he's going up against one of the hardest punchers in the 145 division's history in Ilia Topuria. So that's literally the quintessential rock in a hard place.
Right.
Something's going to have to give here. Max does land at a higher significant strike per minute by a reasonable amount. I think he's at right over 7 significant strikes per minute landed, compared to Topuria's just over 4. But what we know about Ilia is when he does land, boy oh boy, does he put his opponent's lights out. So I think for Max, the way to victory here is going to likely be an outpointing, a decision using his length. Even though he doesn't have the longest arms, Max's reach is notoriously short for his height.
Right.
He does use his range really well. He uses his kicks really well, and he keeps his opponents at bay until he's ready to enter on his terms.
Right.
Now Ilia is going to be looking to get right in on the inside. That's where he does his best work, as you saw with Volkanovski against the cage, kind of fighting in that phone booth, as we call it, and landing those big hooks and those big uppercuts. So the range is going to play a lot into this one. What are your thoughts on the fight, and what do each man need, or what does each man need to do in order to get his hand raised?
I love this fight, and I'm exactly there with you in tossing and turning on as to who I'm going to pick for this.
Yeah.
And when you go and you start shopping it around to see if you can steal somebody's idea or prediction or some good thoughts, if I'm at the gym or something, I'll just be like, hey, what do you guys think about the fights this weekend? It is 50-50.
Yeah.
Half the people go, oh man, the best is blessed. Of course Max is going to win. And then everybody else is like, dude, Topuria is the next, he's the next wave, so he's the one. I think all title fights in the UFC are very hard to predict, and anything can happen in combat sports. That's why it's probably, of all sports, the most hard to actually bet on and win. This fight is actually more difficult than almost all other title fights that I can think of. And when I think about this fight, Max Holloway many times has proven to us that on any given night, he can be the highest level mixed martial artist in the world. I see it that way. The Justin Gaethje performance was nothing short of spectacular. Capped off with the cherry on top. Best knockout for my money in UFC history. So we've seen Max do that, and I believe Ilia Topuria has the skills to be considered one of the top 5 pound-for-pound best fighters on the planet, skill-wise. So I think the fight between these guys this weekend is going to be the highest level of mixed martial arts that we've seen. And at least on paper, it sure should play out that way. One thing that sticks out to me is the difference in their striking styles. They're both very effective in what they do. Ilia Topuria loves to throw quality shots. And most of the time when you throw quality shots, you sacrifice quantity, which is totally fine. And that's normal for everybody. Ilia is really selective with his shots. His landing and significant strike ratio and percentage is always very high because he's not wasting his time. He's using his footwork to bring pressure, to back you up and put you in the positions that he wants you to cut angles, to trap you up against the cage. And look, he hasn't had to show us a whole lot of his grappling yet in his UFC career, but he is the first one to admit that his grappling is even superior to his striking.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll get to see a little bit of grappling in this fight, but Ilia is also the kind of guy that wants to go out there and beat you at your own game. And that's a little bit difficult when you're going with Max Holloway. Ilia Topuria is the kind of guy that wants to go knock everybody out. And statistically, that doesn't happen when you fight Max Holloway. So I don't know if the quality and less volume is going to pay off, because when you look at the other end of the fight, you're looking at Max Holloway. And don't mistake what I'm about to say for him being not a lazy fighter, but one of those guys that'll just throw whatever. He's a quantity striker. He's a heavy volume striker. but in that quantity, there's a whole lot of quality.
Yeah.
You know, he throws things, and his striking accuracy and his significant strike accuracy is that of a Topuria, but he's throwing 5 times the amount of strikes.
Yeah.
So he's very effective, and he might not be the single shot power puncher that Ilia is, but accumulation can do just the same kind of damage. So I think that if Max Holloway is able to implement his game, utilize his feet and his legs and the great footwork that he has to get inside and then also keep the range when he needs to, just like you were saying, that's his best key to success. Max, like you said, doesn't have a long range or a long wingspan, but he fights like a fighter that does, and he appears to have that because he's a kind of a lankier body. But when you see Max Holloway out there and he's utilizing his footwork the way he does, it has to be considered some of the best footwork in the game because he's giving up that length and arm span, but he's using his footwork to not get touched and then stay in the pocket when he needs to. Brilliant defense, brilliant offense. I don't really know how this one's going to go. I have an idea as to which direction I'm going, and I think I'm going to settle in on Max Holloway getting his hand raised, but I don't really see this. I'm back. See, I'm so back and forth on this one.
It's hard.
I was like
predict.
Max by decision. Last night I was like, okay, I'll go to bed and I'll wake up and we'll film. It'll be Max by decision. Now I'm like Max by finish. And so I'm going to go conservative. I want to be right on my prediction. Max, I'm going to go unanimous decision. He's going to get it done, regain his belt, and then it's a blessed era once again.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a very solid prediction. Max, as we know, does not get finished. He's also, in my opinion, at 145 at least, never had an opponent that punches quite as hard as Ilia Topuria does.
Right.
So that's going to be really interesting to see. And the sure money, so to speak, if there is a such thing as sure money in MMA, is that the guy, if it does go to decision, the guy that's more active with more volume is probably going to be the guy that gets his hand raised unless a lot of the fight takes place on the ground.
Right.
Which that's kind of the that's kind of the wild card to me.
Yeah.
How much of this fight actually does take place on the ground?
Right.
Max Holloway's got really good takedown defense. Max Holloway is no slouch on the ground. Max Holloway can roll with the best of them. That's just not what he does. That's not the type of fighter that he is. He's an entertaining. He's your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. He's the fan's favorite fighter.
BMF.
He likes to stand. He's the BMF. He likes to stand and bang with his opponents. And a lot of people, I think, misconstrue that for the fact that maybe he doesn't have good grappling. I certainly think he does. I just don't think it's as good as Ilia's.
Yeah.
So I think Ilia is going to be able to get him on the ground at times. And I could see a scenario where your prediction is correct. Max does land more volume and he does, pepper in a lot of quality into that quantity. But damage is the first metric that's scored as far as the judges are concerned. And part of me is leaning towards Ilia Topuria doing more damage to Max than Max does to Ilia.
Okay.
As well as getting him down a couple of times and landing some pretty key and devastating ground and pound. Max Holloway may be finished at some point in the UFC if he stays around long enough. We know that all fighters' chins go at some point. Right. I don't believe that point has been reached yet. I don't believe Ilia Topuria is going to be the guy to finish Max Holloway. However, I do think he's going to win the fight. And I think he's going to win it with damage, accumulation of damage, as well as a few key takedowns in a couple of the rounds that's going to, transpire into some ground and pound that maybe busts Max up a little bit. The judges score it unanimous for Ilia Topuria. That's going to be my final prediction.
Oh, it's a good one. And either way, this one's a toss-up. We don't know how this is going to go. The odds are pretty close. If you feel good about Blessed, you can put a little money his way because he's the underdog. But we watched Rob Font fight this past weekend, and this fight kind of reminds me in a lot of ways of Chito Vera versus Rob Font. Rob Font is the Max Holloway. Tons of volume he was throwing in that fight. Looked really good. Chito Vera is the Ilia Topuria. He didn't throw that much, but he got his hand raised at the end of it. And so damage is a real thing. So if I could compare two fighters to these two guys in a fight that I could see playing out similar to what we might see this weekend, it's that one. And I don't really know how it's going to go. I'm betting on the Rob Font, the Max Holloway to get his hand raised, but it really can go either way. Ilia's so buttoned up everywhere. He's got the world on his side right now. He's gaining a lot of momentum, but Max is still a young fighter. He's a living legend. He's been there so many times before. I just think Max has been the gatekeeper at 145 for so long, and it just wasn't in the card for him to get back to the title for so long. Now it's time. I feel like that belt belongs to Max Holloway. It was always his, and I think he's going to regain it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, side note, Max Holloway is one of my top 3 favorite fighters of all time.
Everybody's.
So, take that with as it is, because this is not a biased prediction. No. My heart wants Max to win this fight. And there's nothing against Ilia. I like Ilia too, but Max is he's my guy. But I just think, if I'm trying to make a responsible, reasonable prediction, I think it's probably the new guy's time. I think Topuria is going to get it done, and that was a great analogy you made between Rob Font and Chito Vera. In that situation, I think, if memory serves me, Rob doubled up on the amount of strikes that were landed, but Chito still won off of the damage. But then again, my brain goes back to when everybody thought Calvin Kattar was one of the best strikers, or at least best boxers in the UFC, and we literally saw Max schooling him in boxing while speaking to DC in the commentary booth. So, Max Holloway, don't be surprised if he shows this, up and coming champion, this new legend, as it were, that there is in fact levels to this game. So I'm not changing my prediction. It's going to stick with Topuria, but I wouldn't be surprised to see you be right on this one and Max to pull it off.
Yeah, and it's hard to go against a guy that's not only talking to DC as he's fighting and slipping punches, but he was being a gentleman too, and he was looking at DC. He wasn't looking at the punches coming his way. So showman at the highest level. And obviously, we have a great co-main on this fight card.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Robert Whittaker and Chimaev in the co-main, 5 rounds. And I believe the difference between 3 rounds and 5 rounds is the difference maker in this fight.
Yes.
As far as where you would put your prediction and how you see this fight playing out, who's going to be able to implement their game plan. The 2 extra rounds really does make a huge difference in this one. And look, both guys are showmen. I think Khamzat's a little bit more showy than Robert Whittaker, but Robert is undeniable. The highlight reels, the undeniability. I mean, he's everybody. He's Max Holloway for 85.
Yeah,
right?
he really is. Yeah,
a lot of similarities there. So I guess we can get into that one next. And so obviously when we're going over to the Middle East and we're putting on these big fight cards, it's star-studded. It's going to be a huge event, and there's a ton of great Middle Eastern fighters, Muslim fighters, people that have spent a lot of time over there. Nobody more popular than Khamzat Chimaev.
Yeah,
right?
This is usually Islam Makhachev's card. The October card in Abu Dhabi is typically when Islam Makhachev defends his belt, but obviously he's going through, I believe it's a hand surgery, so he's going to be out. But the next best thing that you have is Whittaker versus Chimaev as far as that fan base is concerned. And I think a lot of people are going to be very heavily cheering for Chimaev, but at the same time, everybody loves Robert Whittaker, no matter what corner of the world you come from, or you are a fan of Robert Whittaker if you're a fan of MMA at all. My prediction would have been very clear cut. Khamzat had the Ikram Aliskerov fight not happen with Robert Whittaker, because Robert hadn't finished anybody in a while, and he sort of looked like, okay, he's still really good, but is he getting a little bit of, too many miles on him?
Right.
And then he comes out with a performance like that and just knocks the socks off a top 10 fighter and shows like, hey, you know what? It may have been a few years since I got a knockout finish, but make no mistake, I can still do it. Khamzat Chimaev does get hit. Yeah. And this is a 5-round fight. Rob is hard to finish. It's not impossible to finish Rob, but he's hard to finish. Yeah. If the way I see this is, if Khamzat doesn't get Rob out of there in 3 rounds, he's going to need to pack a lunch, because rounds 4 and 5 are going to be really, really bad for Boris. Yeah. So really, to me, it comes down to how much damage is Rob going to take in the early rounds, 1 through 2 or 1 through 3. And then how much gas is going to be left in the tank for Chimaev if Rob is able to weather the storm for rounds 3 through 5. So it's going to be really crucial, in my opinion at least, for Khamzat to do some massive damage early and try to get a finish early, because he may need to concede rounds 4 and 5 out of pure exhaustion. Right. We don't know. He's brought in a new chef. He's done some different things with his training. He's scaled back a little bit. He had a problem with overtraining in the past. Right. So we'll see if the new changes bring about a new Khamzat, but really all we have to go off of right now is the Khamzat that we have seen in the cage thus far, and that's a Khamzat that does get a little tired, that does get hit a little bit too often, that does get exposed a bit every now and then. And Robert Whittaker, if you have an area to be exposed, believe you me, Robert Whittaker will find it, and he will do all the exposing that you care to have happen. So, man, this is a hard one for me to call. I think I'm going to pick Robert Whittaker to win this fight. because I just think he's crafty enough as a veteran to not absorb too much damage early on. I think Khamzat is there to be hit, and Rob has showed us that he still does have some pop in his shot. So I'm gonna say Robert Whittaker weathers the storm in the first 2 rounds. Come round 3, he really starts to take over against a gassed Chimaev, and then he ekes out a decision victory, potentially even a late finish. But I think my final prediction is going to be Robert Whittaker by decision, 3-2.
Good prediction, safe prediction. And I think given that it's 5 rounds, does sort of lean in Robert's favor. Now, when you talk about Chimaev's gas tank, you're dead on. He has no gas by the time the fights are over, and he's usually in 3-round fights. But you have to understand that is one of those situations where, yes, he is completely out of gas by the time the fight's over. But if you're his coach or if you're a fan of his, would you like to see him breathing air easily and not that tired at the end of the fight? I don't know. I think I'd rather see somebody go give it their all. And if they truly gas out, then so be it. But I think Khamzat Chimaev is a pressure fighter. I think the tenacity and the aggression that he has leading up to the fights, everything that is the Khamzat Chimaev experience, it comes to life on fight week.
Yeah.
And it's a full thing. He sprints to the octagon, and the music, he has that cool song that goes with it, and he's aggressive. He'll get on top of the octagon while they're announcing his name, and nobody does anything about it. Nobody in the commission's pulling him down or anything.
Yeah.
There's just something about him.
He's an undeniable force.
He's an undeniable force, but everybody does run out of gas, and that's the biggest hump for me. I think if this is a 3-round fight, you don't hear much hesitation out of my voice. I'm going Khamzat Chimaev likely by finish, because he has 15 minutes. He can go. Second round submissions, what I would say in a 3rd-round fight. 5 rounds, if he doesn't come out and do that same pace, which I don't recommend to do, because given round 4 and 5, you have nothing left. So if he doesn't go out there and do that, then he's going to have to, like you said, pack a lunch and go for the long fight, go for a late finish, or go for a decision. And that's where it does get a little bit more tricky. So I think there's a fine line that Khamzat needs to play. I think he needs to be a little bit deceptive. I think he needs to go for some shots. I think he needs to not show that he's afraid to strike with Robert, but I think Robert, with his mobility, his karate stance, the fact that he's a good defensive wrestler, and his striking is pretty good, even though he's a little bit shorter for the division. All of those things are very good for Robert Whittaker, but Khamzat Chimaev can negate some of them. If he can take Robert to the ground, which I believe he can start to tire him out. He can start to exhaust Robert. And if he can do that, then getting the fight to the ground in rounds 2, 3, 4, and 5 will be a little bit easier. And if he's able to do that, after what we saw him do against Kevin Holland, just threatening the submission until he finds it, not letting up on position until you find submission, that sort of tenacity, I believe, is enough to get him a submission over Robert Whittaker.
Wow.
So I think, as crazy as this sounds, I was going to go 5 rounds. It's Bobby Knuckles. I'm going to go second round submission, Khamzat Chimaev. Going to be a fun first round. We're going to see a little bit of striking, but I think Robert's going to have an edge on the feet. Khamzat's not going to like it. He's going to entertain it for a little bit, just enough for Robert to forget about it. He'll change levels some way, get a nice takedown, and then from then on, he's going to be looking for that submission.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great prediction. I mean, and the other thing is, too, Khamzat knows that title implications are on the line
For
here.
sure.
It's likely that Sean Strickland's going to fight Dricus du Plessis next. However, if Khamzat Chimaev is able to finish Bobby Knuckles by submission, emphatic fashion, something like that, they may still make the Strickland DDP fight, but it'll be very clear cut that Khamzat is going to fight the winner of that matchup. And, Khamzat versus Sean or Khamzat versus DDP, either way that slices out, that's a mega fight. This is what Khamzat, wants. This is where he feels like he is in his career. It's time to now become the champion that he's always thought himself to be, and sort of prove to the world that, hey, all that hype that was behind me back in 2020 when I came in, that hasn't gone anywhere. I know it cooled off with the health stuff and with the pullouts and things, but now I'm going to show you guys why I belong at the top of the heap, and I'm going to do it by finishing a legend. So I'm going to stick with Bobby Knuckles, but Khamzat's going to be looking to have his biggest, most emphatic win to date, and he certainly has all of the makings to do it. It's in Abu Dhabi. He's going to have a massive fan base there. He's fighting a legend. We talk about this all the time on this show. It's very rare that if you're a fighter on the come up that you get paired up and locked into a cage with a former champion.
Right.
Their former champions just aren't that easy to find because, they lose their belt, they stick around for a fight or two, they lose, both of them, or they lose 2 or 3 fights in a row. They're like, sorry, I'm out. Yeah, I'm not going to let the rest of these young bucks make their name off of me. So if there is a former champ floating around somewhere and you get paired up with them, that's your opportunity.
Right.
And believe me, Khamzat knows that, especially with a beloved fighter like a Robert Whittaker. So I still don't think it's going to be enough to beat the crafty veteran, but I'm very excited for the fight. I want to move now to the feature bout. Lerone Murphy versus Dan 50K Ige.
Great fight.
This, to me, is my sleeper fight of the night.
Oh, yeah.
I think that if the main event doesn't turn out the way that we think it might, I think this one has a really good chance of being fight of the night. Both of these guys like to put on a show. Both of these guys are excellent strikers.
Dan Ige's got it in his name.
Yeah, 50K. Yeah, he should change it to 100K Ige because the guy deserves a bigger bonus every time he steps out there. Literally steps in the day of a fight and gets in there and saves the card to a certain degree. Murphy's a pretty big favorite, almost 3-1. I understand why. He's a little bit sharper. He's very undefeated, very, very skilled when it comes to striking. But Dan's a veteran. Don't mistake that. Dan is as game as they come. He's crafty, and he knows how to win minutes. He knows how to win exchanges. And when you do those things, it culminates into winning rounds. So I think I'm going to go Murphy. I believe that the skill set is just a little bit more buttoned up than Dan Ige, but I do think this is going to be a very good fight, potentially split decision. I could see it going 29-28, 29-28, and 29-28, 1 for Ige and 2 for Murphy. Right. So I think this is going to be a very close fight. I think it's going to be a fun fight. Both guys pretty hard to finish. I like this one as a decision.
Yeah, both guys are hard to finish. And Dan Ige is great. And most of the time when Dan Ige's fighting, he has a height disadvantage and a range disadvantage. He will have that again tonight, but that hasn't stopped him from getting countless 50K bonuses. Yeah. So there are plenty of ways for Dan Ige to win this fight, not just if it takes it to the ground, but also on the feet. He's got heavy hands. He knows how to find his target. But Lerone Murphy, if you're not watching him, he's high level. This dude is very, very good. Some of the striking, I would say, is on that same level, same pedigree, and don't go crazy for me, but of like an Israel Adesanya. Yeah. He is so clean with his striking. His feints are beautiful. His entries, he does really great work with his feet. His footwork and angles are nice, and he sets his shots up really well.
We saw what he did against Edson Barbosa. You talk about good strikers. I mean, Edson's got to be near the top of your list.
Exactly. That was the exact performance that was just playing in my mind as I'm thinking about the Lerone Murphy-Dan Ige fight. Both dudes so good, but I think Lerone Murphy is sort of that next breed of 45ers coming up that are going to show us some new wrinkles in the striking game, and he's got the body for it. He fills out that frame pretty much perfectly. Yeah. He's long, he doesn't have a whole lot of fat to cut, and he's very muscle bound. So I think I'm going to go Lerone Murphy on this one. I think he gets it done. And Edson Barbosa was getting beat up that whole fight. Dan Ige is very durable, but Lerone seems to be that guy. He's got very good skills. I think the speed advantage is going to be his biggest benefit. And I think that he catches Dan Ige a couple of times, hurts him, and then eventually finds his shot with a TKO. I'm going to go third round TKO Lerone Murphy.
Took us 3 predictions, but we finally come to an agreement.
There we go.
So I think we're probably going to come to. I'd be very surprised if we didn't on this next one. Magomed Ankalaev, Alexander Rakić.
It's a good fight.
It's a good fight. Good fight. I won't bury the lead. I think Ankalaev's going to be too much for Rakić. He can comparable on the feet. I think that Ankalaev's a little bit more disciplined than Rakić is. Doesn't take as many chances, but I think there's going to be a massive advantage when it comes to grappling, and I don't think that Rakić will be able to make up for that. I think Ankalaev will kind of play things safe, stay stay behind a jab, throw some low kicks, and look for his level changes and his opportunities, I think he's going to get Rakić to the ground. I believe that he's going to, take his time with this, utilize some ground and pound, start to break Rakić down. And then once he does have him broken down and he sees a little bit of that exposure, maybe some neck exposure, some arm exposure from Rakić, he's going to seal the deal with a submission. I'm going to say second round submission for Magomed Ankalaev. He's looking to cement his name as the front runner to challenge Alex Pereira for the 205 belt. With a finish over Rakić, he certainly puts his name in the sweepstakes. I know there's Tom Aspinall, there's John Jones, there's a whole gamut of things that Alex Pereira could do that would be bigger fights, quote unquote, than than Ankalaev. But one thing about Pereira that we've seen, and this is just a little side note, so I won't take it too far, is that he does kind of want to fight the next man up. Like, look, I'll fight 3 times a year. I'll fight in December if I have to. I'll give me whoever's next. Right. So I don't think that Alex would shy away from Ankalaev. I think Ankalaev knows that, and I think he also knows that with after the Jan Blachowicz draw and everything, that if he wants to get that title shot, he needs to get a finish here against Rakić. A close decision win against Alexander Rakić, who just lost to Yuri Prohaska, is not going to be enough to move the needle to get him squared in the cage with Alex Pereira. And so that's why I brought Alex into the conversation. I think Magomed submits Alexander Rakić in the second round, rear naked choke.
Damn, okay, so he's going to make quick work of him. Yeah, and it's a 3-round fight, so if there's a finish, they've got to get to work pretty quickly. And I think either guy is at that champion or contender caliber, but I do see Ankalaev as having the advantage on the feet and on the ground. Now Rakić can score on the feet. He's got explosive footwork. He's got good striking, but Ankalaev is the complete mixed martial artist here. So it's not even that the takedowns are what Rakić can't avoid. It's the threat. It's the fact that your range is constantly being compromised when you're fighting a guy who can take the fight to the ground at any moment. Because now you have to give yourself an extra couple inches. Every time you go to throw a strike, you got to make sure he's not changing levels and shooting on you.
Right.
You got to throw jabs at different cadences. You got to step different ways when you throw strikes, so you can't telegraph too much and give him too much information for him to work off of. See a pattern in your movement and then expose it. So I think Ankalaev, being the better grappler, the better complete mixed martial artist, will give him the advantage on the feet. I think if Rakić doesn't go out there and make it a dogfight, make it ugly, and get reckless out there early, he's not going to get his hand raised. Yeah. And then the other thing that sticks out to me is durability. And look, there's accidents and injuries that happen in MMA all the time. I know Rakić has dealt with his share of that even recently. But I just think that Magomed is a very, very durable fighter. Yeah. And I don't even know if he wins this fight, if Chama could knock him out. Maybe he could. I haven't seen it yet, but it seems like he's got a great chin. He's well conditioned, big, tall body, good frame, fills out 205 well. I don't know, but I mean, we still have a lot of answers to get answered. But if I was Khamzat, if I was Chama, if I was Alex Pereira, what I would do to disrupt the night for the emerging 205ers, whoever wins, get on Twitter, and I would call them out immediately. I want to fight in December. I'm the champ. You don't want to fight me? Then we're going to pull somebody else out of the rankings like we just did Roundtree. Yeah. Now, Ankalaev or Rakić, whoever gets their hand raised, can't even relax and go enjoy a nice steak or whatever it is they want to do with their team after, because their title opportunity that they're literally fighting for that night is now in their hands, and the guy's saying, okay, 3 months from now, I want to fight you. Yeah. We've seen 2 months. 2 months. We've seen the UFC do that before. Sugar Sean and Aljamain Sterling. That was a quick turnaround for Aljo. We could see them do the same thing for Alex Pereira. If I was Alex, I would do that, and I'm assuming that he has the same thought as me, so be on the lookout for the bottom left screen of the UFC. Yeah. I think Chama might have a word or two for him on Twitter.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the UFC certainly doesn't need a whole lot of convincing to keep Magomed Ankalaev out of a title fight with Alex Pereira, and I'm not in the boat of people that think that Alex can't beat Magomed. Somehow the narrative has become Alex Pereira, his kryptonite would be Magomed Ankalaev. Magomed Ankalaev is very, there to be hit. He's got great striking, but make no mistake, Alex will certainly land shots, and we'll test that durability. I know we're getting way ahead of ourselves here.
John Jones is the only person that's beating Alex Pereira. That's my opinion, but we can save that.
Maybe Tom Aspinall too, but that was Hot take.
Yeah, nah, not yet.
So we have deviated from the prediction.
Yes,
but
sorry.
Final prediction, second round submission, Magomed Ankalaev. Are you going Ankalaev as well?
Yeah, I'm gonna go Ankalaev, but and I think he's gonna do enough to get the number one spot. I think it's gonna be unanimous decision though. I don't really know if he's gonna get Rakić out of there. If he does, it's gonna be ground and pound. But again, it's 3 rounds. Rakić is durable and he knows what he's doing on the ground to stay safe. So I see this going unanimous decision Ankalaev's way.
All right, so that brings us to the the first fight on the main card, Shara Bullet versus Armen Petrosyan. And
what a curtain jerker.
Yeah, right. That great fight to start it out. You know, Armen is a striker like Shara. He's got roots in Muay Thai. He's 9-3, so just 12 fights under his belt. So to me, this feels like a favorable matchup for Sharaput and Magomedov. And I think he's probably going to get the job done.
Yeah.
You know, the interesting thing about Shara Bullet, and you and I were talking about this before we started rolling, is that he comes from the same area of the world that the Khabibs, the Islam, you know, that whole stable of fighters come from. But he's totally different. He's a striker for one, and he's a real showman, and he's very brash. You know, Islam, Khabib, those guys, they were like, we're going to win fights, and off merit, we're going to make ourselves undeniable, and we're going to get title shots.
That's right.
Magomed is a little bit different, and he's kind of a breath of fresh air because you don't normally see fighters from Dagestan bring that type of differentiating factor to the equation. And he's fun to watch. Now, he has a long way to go between where he is now and becoming a UFC champion.
Right.
But he's being given matchups that are favorable for him because the UFC sees the star power in him. There's no secret anymore. We know how the sausage is made. If you're a marketable fighter and you have the ability to maybe become a champion, but your star power right now exceeds your skill level, then the UFC is going to give you, they need to keep you active because in order to stay a star, you have to fight.
Right.
So what they're going to do is they're going to give you fighters that aren't easy fights. This isn't, you know, boxing, you know, so to speak. Sorry to harp on boxing there, but you know, a lot of boxing fights over the last 10 years have been quote unquote, and they'll even say it, I need a quote unquote tune-up fight. This is not what this is. However, this is a very manageable and very winnable fight for Shara Bullet because he's fighting a guy with less experience than he has, does have 3 losses on his record, has been knocked out before, has been submitted before, and is going to give the sort of looks that Shara Bullet wants to see in order to work his game plan to the best of his ability. So I see Shara winning this one. Probably by decision. I think Armen's going to be a little bit tough to finish, but I could see Shara, you know, winning a 30-27 decision here. Yeah,
Shara's great, and he's undeniable. I do like the fact that they're bringing him up. They see the same star power that we all see in Shara Bullet. And yes, he's very different than the other guys, the Muslim fighters that come from that region of the world, but it's all for good. Like, okay, I'm still going to have the beard, guys. I'm going to shave the mustache, but I'm growing the hair out a little bit crazy. The beard's going to be a little bit longer. My face does the rest.
I'm going to do a little more trash talking than the others.
And I love that, you know, and this point is going to tie into the next one, but I love that Shara Bullet is connecting himself through call-outs to all these big names. Kevin Holland, teammate of mine, good friend, he is always being called out by people. Shara Bullet, it was 2 fights into his UFC career, he's calling out Kevin Holland with like a iguana in his hand. He's out in Hollywood or whatever.
I remember that.
Calling him out to fight in America when apparently he couldn't fight in America. So I remember when that was all happening, and when I saw it, I'm like, okay, well, he's not on Kevin's level as far as star goes yet, but it was brilliant to, you know, attach himself to Kevin, get a week's worth of news going. He's obviously not going to fight Kevin next. You know, Kevin's bouncing between 2 divisions. He's always saving cards, fighting big names, but he connected himself to him, and then they have to give him somebody to fight. So might as well just pull somebody else that's from the unranked of the division. And when you're in the UFC's position, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. You really can't win if you're the UFC and the matchmakers in this situation. Because when you look at Shara Bullet, if they said, okay, he's hot, he's hype, let's throw him right into the top 10, people go,
Bo Nickel or somebody like that.
Right, or even more extreme, go, you know, maybe Jack Hermanson or somebody ranked right off the gate. People go, oh, they're showing him favors, they're letting him jump right into the rankings. So it's like, okay, well then we won't do that. We will bring him up until he, basically bumps into the top 15, and then we'll start letting him fight them. And like, oh, they're sandbagging, they're giving him easy matchups. So what do you want them to do? They have to go one way or the other. I think this direction they're going with Shera is the right direction. And a guy like Armen Petrosyan, good fighter. He's going to have a nice career in the UFC, but Shera Bullet is the attraction in this fight. He's a more skilled fighter. Petrosyan's not going to try to take him down. I think he's going to try to stand and strike with him. And I believe Shera's got some pretty good pop on his shots. He's got some interesting kicks. He's really dynamic when it comes to his footwork. And, he'll jump into a Muay Thai stance. He'll get into some inside boxing, and then he'll also bounce like a Wonder Boy, like a karate stance.
Yeah.
So you don't really know what you're going to get, and every round could be different with Shera Bullet. But one thing's for sure, violence is coming. There's usually a lot of damage coming behind his shots, and I think the momentum's on his side. I'm going finish, though. I think Shera Bullet, this is his statement fight. I think this is the one that's really going to put him on everybody's map. I'm going second round finish, TKO. A lot of finishes. If you're checking out the card and you think my predictions are going to be right, a lot of finishes.
I know I've been the decision guy today. I don't know why I'm predicting decisions on all
No,
these,
they're not going over there and getting decisions. We're not going to need much judge help, at least on the main card. So I'm going to go second round TKO finish for Shera Bullet.
Yeah, and the X factor, I think Armen has certainly the better strength of schedule.
For sure.
He was in there with Caio Borralho. He's had, I think, 3 or 4 UFC fights already.
Yeah.
He lost that fight to Caio, but he's been in there with competition above the level of that Shera Bullet has been in there with. So
sure.
That's just something to consider when making your own personal predictions. However, I'm sticking with Shera Bullet. I think he's going to get the job done.
Yeah, I think we got some good ones. We went different on a couple, and we went the same on some. So, well, at least one of us will be right on some of these calls.
There we go. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. We drop new videos every single week. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button and let us know in the comments, who do you think is going to win each one of these fights? We'd love to hear it. We'll see you next time.
Peace.